Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina astafa. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad an-Nabiyyil Ummi wa ala alihi wa sallim taslima. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad kullama dhakarahu dhakirun wa salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad kullama ghafala an dhikrihil ghafilun. Rabbikfir warham wa tajawaz amma ta'lam innaka antal a'azzul akram. Rabbikfir warham wa anta khairur rahimin. Allahumma inna na'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa' wa qalbin la yakhsha' wa du'a'in la yusma' wa nafsin la tashba' wa min ha'ula'il arba'. Allahumma ati anfusana taqwaha wa zakkiha anta khairu man zakkaha anta waliyuha wa maulaha. Allahumma musarrifal qulub sarrif qulubana ala ta'atik ya muqallibal qulub thabbit qulubana ala dinika. Allahumma aghnina bil ilm wa zayyinna bil hilm wa akrimna bit taqwa wa jammilna bil afiyah. Allahumma astur awratina wa amin rawatina. Amma ba'd. Today the topic is about waridat. It's all about waridat. Waridat are those things that come unto the heart, the divine inspirations. The Shaykh Rahimahullah Al-Iskandari Nawwarallahu marqadahu wa nafa'ana bi ulumihim amin says, you are blessed with divine marifa. Why? Why? So that by virtue of it, you attain the ability of entering the lofty divine court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For entrance into the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The warid, that is that which comes down to the heart, that is sent to you so that you are released from the claws of aliens and emancipated from enslavement to the desires of the nafs. To be released from the claws of aliens. Aliens mean Ghairullah. Everything else besides Allah are aliens. To be emancipated also from the enslavement of the desires of the nafs. The purpose of the warid is to set you free from the prison of your wujud and existence, and deliver you into the vast realm of the mushahada and perception of your master. And he called this as being a vast realm. The meaning of warid here is divine knowledge, ilham, inspiration, that which comes to the heart. So warid means divine knowledge, the subtleties the mysteries and gifted knowledge, ilmun ladunniyun, ilmun wahbiyun, the gifted knowledge which involuntarily enters into the heart of the salik. In the aforementioned statement, the Shaykh Rahmatullah alayh mentions 3 factors which occasion the incidence of the waridat. Let's go into them. When the salik initially engages in dhikr and shughul, occupation with ibadat, his heart is perplexed, disturbed, confused, but he forcibly applies himself to the dhikr and shughul. This state remains for a short period of time. In this state, the heart begins to derive pleasure in dhikr. It begins to derive pleasure in dhikr after the perplexion. The state now progresses higher, and the salik desires to be perpetually engrossed in dhikr. That's his desire. He wants to be always absorbed in dhikr, always absorbed in dhikr. It may be, as the Mashayikh say, dast bakar, dil bayar. Dast bakar, hands at work, dil bayar. Heart is with the friend. He desires to be always in dhikr. When the dhikr permeates the heart, the incidence of waridat commences. That is when waridat starts now. When the zikr permeates the heart, the incidence of waridat commences. Example, he perceives, now not with these eyes, but he perceives with the eyes of the heart. And the eyes of the heart are called basirat, dil ki aankhein. That all actions are the creation of Khaliq. He then no longer attributes any act to any being besides Allah. Everything is happening by Allah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. This is a warid which enters his heart involuntarily. Involuntarily. However, in the beginning, it will be somewhat blurred, and sometimes it will become manifest. The purpose of this warid, which comes now involuntarily, is to increase in the salik's enthusiasm for obedience and zikr, so that he acquires the ability of admission to the lofty divine court. But even in this state, the desire of the nafs still remains intact, and complete ikhlas is not yet achieved in ibadat. Still has to go. Complete ikhlas is still not yet achieved in ibadah. This initial warid, which is the basirat that he sees now with, and it starts, this initial warid is followed by another warid, which may be the result of progress in the first warid, or it may altogether be a warid of a different kind. As a result of progress in the first warid, or it may altogether be a warid of a different kind. In this path, it's just like entering a madrasa. You move from level to level, from stage to stage. Form 1 to Form 2, to Form 3 to Form 5, Alimiyah 1, Alimiyah 2, different levels. The effect of this second warid now, the effect of the first warid, it brings with it basirat, eyes of the heart. This is to gain him entrance into the divine court. The second warid, the effect of this warid, where am I? Yes, the effect of this warid now will be the emancipation of the salik from aliens and nafsani desires, to free him from Ghayrullah, to free him from things other than Allah, and to free him from nafsani desires. The salik will now be drawn to Allah in ecstasy, in ecstasy. However, even after this second warid, the salik's gaze is still on his nafs. Still hasn't reached nafs mutma'inna. The salik's gaze is still on his nafs, and he reposes a measure of reliance on himself. That's still there. He still has that tawakkul in himself, a measure of reliance on himself. That ana is still there, ananiyat. He also regards himself to be in good stead. I'm okay. Thus he still remains imprisoned in the narrow confines of existence. He's still in the narrow confines of wujud and conscious of his existence and his wujud. He has not lost himself yet. Then follows a third warid, which extricates the salik from his existence, his wujud. It extricates him from his wujud. That is, it takes him out from the nothingness. The nothingness of his existence is in view. May kuch bhi nahi ho. That's in view. Nothingness of his existence is in view. In this station, the salik breaks free now from all the chains and fetters of the nafs. Freedom. Right now, we are still imprisoned, unfortunately. He thus reaches, so when he has broken free from all the chains and the fetters of the nafs, Allahu Akbar, he thus reaches now the boundless realm of mushahada-e haq. And that is boundless, it's vast. The realms of mushahada, perception, huzuri of haq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, with the batini eyes, with the internal eyes, he vividly perceives his Maula and his Master, Allah Ta'ala, with greater perception than the perception of the corporeal eyes of physical objects. He sees, just as a man may see physical objects to a greater extent, now he has mushahada of his Maula. The realm in which the salik gains entry in this station has been described as boundless, vast or spacious. What plains to wonder. Wow. Because as long as there remains any vestige of the nafs, the heart still dwells in a prison. It still dwells in a prison. And when all vestiges and asarat of the nafs have been eliminated, the salik then emerges from his prison and steps into a vast, boundless realm, and he is now freed. Now he is free to go into this boundless realm. But as I said before, it's all step by step, and there's progress in this path. There's also regress in this path. There's also stagnancy in this path. When the salik has entered into this lofty realm, which is so spacious and vast, he becomes absorbed in mushahada-e haq. Mushahada-e haq. In all conditions and circumstances, all he sees is Allah. All he sees is Allah. All he can perceive is Allah in all circumstances and conditions. There now remains no trace of anxiety and uncertainty in the salik. But there's always a composure and a coolness, and we can witness this from our mashayikh and our elders. There's always this no trace of anxiety and uncertainty. In all circumstances, he is contented. Be it sickness or health, he is contented. Be it adversity or prosperity, he is contented. Only those to whom these spiritual conditions occur understand and perceive the pleasure. It's like talking about al-jima ma'al ahal. But only those who have experienced it, they understand the pleasure and perceive the pleasure. Whoever has not tasted does not know. May Allah Ta'ala bestow to us this lofty bounty. Allahumma ameen. Wa ma dhalika ala Allahi bi aziz. And that is not hard on Allah. It's not difficult. Wa ma dhalika ala Allahi bi aziz. So the bayan is about the waridat. Waridat. Waridat-e ilahiyya. Divine inspirations. They mostly occur suddenly, so that the banda refrains from claiming this incidence on the basis of his spiritual capability and ability to avoid him from that pitfall. Meaning of this, it has earlier been mentioned several times, the spiritual mysteries and the subtleties inspired into the salik's heart, these waridat, are not the product of his effort and choice. Sometimes the banda waits. He waits in expectation of warid, but it fails to transpire. In most cases, the occurrence of warid is at a time when it was least expected. The occurrence transpires suddenly and unexpectedly, achanak. The reason underscoring this suddenness is to prevent the salik from becoming a claimant of this occurrence, as though I achieved it. If waridat could have been the effects of the salik's volitional, ikhtiyari, choice and will, he would have suffered from the notion of his own capability and ability, and he would put forward claims. Such self-esteem would then lead to his corruption and destruction. It always does. Give Mufti Majid a drink of chai there. Such self-esteem would then lead to his corruption and destruction. Caught up in ujub, in vanity, he would become completely ghafil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one is zikr. What's the opposite of dhikr? Ghaflat. So waridat are like gifts. These are the gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَلِكَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. Whenever Allah ta'ala wishes, He directs His fadl to the banda and bestows this bounty of waridat to his heart. The Shaykh alayhi rahmah says, the salik should inform only his Shaykh of his waridat and no one else. And this is very, very important for progress in this path. Inform only his Shaykh of his waridat and to no one else. Should he divulge it to others, you know what's going to happen? Its effect will diminish in his heart and it will impede, block the relationship of haqq which he has with Allah Ta'ala. The meaning of this is, it is highly inappropriate for the salik to divulge the inspirations and the waridat of his heart to anyone besides his sheikh. Even at this point here, let me divert the talk a little bit. In hadith, we are informed by the Rasul alayhi salam, more or less, that whatever ni'mats and favors that Allah has bestowed upon you, ruhani, etc., even gifts, you should protect it by keeping it a secret. Because when you open it out and expose it, people become envious of you. There's hasad and jealousy, and people put their nazar on you. So even if, people like to talk about, and my son this, and my son that, and my son has achieved this, and he has accomplished that, and then people are becoming envious of your son. Or you're speaking about yourself or certain progress on certain things, and people become envious of you. You're going to embark on some job, some mission, something you have in mind. Don't tell anybody about it. You tell people about it, they don't put the nazar on it. Hasad, envy. Same thing in this path also too. Besides that, there's another reason for not telling anyone else besides the sheikh. Because you go and you tell people. Why are you telling people for? About certain waridat which are coming. Why? The nafs derives pleasure. One is, for example, sometimes a man might get a nice dream. He gets a nice dream, and the Rasul alayhi salam told us, no problem, you get a good dream, then you can let people know about a good dream, because it will inspire others. Okay? Or there may be some message in that dream that has come from the royal court, or from the court of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It has to be transmitted to the people. But sometimes a person speaks. Why? Because when he talks about that, now people will watch him in high esteem. See how the nafs comes into play there? The nafs derives pleasure when this information is divulged. Who gains the pleasure there? The nafs. Because the salik's holiness and piety and greatness becomes confirmed in the estimation of others. So the nafs deriving a lot of pleasure, because other people now look at him as, wow, he's special, he's holy boy. This pleasure of the nafs, which is ujub, or vanity, self-esteem, provides impetus for the lowly bestial attributes, akhlaqi radila, for them to move and to show their ugly heads very quickly. In consequence, the effect of the warid diminishes. The actual aim of the warid was to destroy and suppress the rebellion of the nafs. However, when the nafs is strengthened, the effect of the warid will diminish. Anytime the nafs is strengthened, the ruh becomes weaker. And the salik's bond of truth with his Rabb will be adversely affected. The banda's relationship of truth with his Rabb envisages constant humility and subjection in the divine court. The banda's relationship of haqq with his Rabb envisages constant humility and subjection in the divine court. The state of slavery, abdiyat, and the fear for Allah should never be absent. Should never be absent. But when the salik reveals his warid to others, ma'adallah, when the salik reveals his warid to others, he feels pleased with himself, since others will think highly of him. Highly of him. He then becomes afflicted with the ailment of vanity. That's an ailment. Ujub. Vanity. The disposition of ubudiyat and khushu, which is, khushu is a mixture of humility and fear called khushu, humility and fear. This disposition of ubudiyat and khushu disappears. Truth with Allah Ta'ala therefore no longer remains. Man sakata salima. So true. At the time, the Sheikh says, alayhi rahmah, at the time of the manifestation of knowledge and realities by way of inspiration, by way of waridat, the warid is ambiguous. It is ambiguous. After committing it to memory, its explanation follows. In this regard, it is said in the Holy Quran, فَإِذَا قَرَأْنَاهُ فَاتَّبِعْ قُرْآنَهُ. When we recite the Quranic revelation, then you pay attention to its recitation. Pay attention to its recitation. Then it is our responsibility to have it explained. When the hearts of the Arifin are freed from aliens and they emerge from the confines of their personal will, perpetually focusing their gaze on Allah, then haqa'iq, realities, spiritual knowledge are bestowed to them in the form of waridat, cascading into the heart. But at the time of the manifestation of such knowledge, the divine warid overwhelms the heart and the senses. Senses gone. Thus the inspirational knowledge acquired is concise. It is concise, without detailed clarity. The clarity of the meanings of the warid is not attained at the precise time of the incidence of the inspiration, because the comprehension of knowledge is the function of the senses, and at such a time the senses are overwhelmed. However, at the time of the transpiration of the spiritual knowledge, all the senses become inoperative. Nevertheless, the concise meaning is impressed in his spiritual qalb and heart. Later, after the cessation of the progress of the warid, the salik attains the meanings by virtue of his intelligence, rational and narrational knowledge. It becomes explained to him. He is then able to expound this inspirational knowledge. This is comparable to wahi, which is exclusive to the Anbiya, alayhimus salatu wassalam. During the incidents of wahi, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would recite simultaneously with Jibril alayhi salam in an attempt to memorize the revelation. Thereupon the following ayat was revealed. فَإِذَا قَرَأْنَاهُ فَاتَّبِعْ قُرْآنَهُ. When we recited here what? فَاتَّبِعْ قُرْآنَهُ. Follow its recitation. You follow its recitation. Then its explanation and bayan, hamari zimmedari. It's our responsibility. So the inspirational knowledge of the Arifin resembles the incidents of wahi in that at the time of its occurrence, its meaning becomes impressed in a concise form in the heart of the salik. Its detailed elaboration follows later. The Sheikh mentions here, he says, do not become pleased with a warid, the effect of which you are unaware. The desired benefit of clouds is not rain, but the growth of fruit. Wow, kya baat hai. The desired benefit of clouds is not rain, but the growth of fruit. The actual aim, maqsood asli, of the waridat descending on the salik is the suppression of the nafs rebellion. Always remember that, to suppress the nafs. The elimination of the evil attributes and progress in obedience and attention on Allah Ta'ala. That's the maqsood asli. When there occurs such a warid which produces no such effect, leaving the nafs in its former state, the salik should not be happy because the actual aim has not been achieved. There is no benefit in a warid which leaves the nafs stagnant in its present state without producing any elevation in the salik's humility, fear and ubudiyat. Many salikin hanker after waridat and spiritual states, ahwal, while being deficient in external deeds of virtue, yet they hanker after that. This is a grave deception. The Shaykh Ali Rahmah says, when the anwar of waridat permeate you and spiritual mysteries are now entrusted to you, do not desire their perpetuation, because you, O Salik, being absorbed in the mushahada of Allah, should be aloof and independent of all things. Nothing, however, can make you independent of Him. What this means is, frequently, the Salik deriving pleasure from a warid on account of it being a new experience, and you know, kullu jadidin ladhid, he turns his concentration towards it, to the warid. He sometimes gains the erroneous impression that this state of receiving waridat has become his permanent condition, and he derives great pleasure therein. But when the effect of this state dissipates, he is overtaken by grief. He therefore hankers after the acquisition of this condition, little realizing that he has already achieved the purpose of the warid. So why is wanted to still be there? Little realizing that he has already achieved the purpose of the warid, and that he still possesses the achievement in spite of the warid's effect having disappeared. However, he does not now perceive the existence of the warid's benefit. Why? Because his disposition has already become accustomed to it, whereas initially he had derived pleasure since the experience of the warid was yet new to him. The permeation of his zahir and batin, outward and inward, with the anwar of the warid imposes the condition of ubudiyat on the entire being of the salik. He therefore does not perceive it. Why he doesn't perceive it? Since it is no longer a new experience. It is for this reason that the Shaykh Rahmatullah Ali instructs the salik that when the anwar, the rays of nur of the warid permeate you, and your zahir and your batin, inside, outside, become elevated on account of the kayfiyat and the state of ubudiyat produced by the warid, resulting in the progress of divine attributes in the heart, that is the asrar or the mysteries of the waridat, then do not desire the perpetuation of the waridat. Do not expect the initial state of dominance, ghalaba, to endure endlessly, nor become despondent on account of the dissipation of this initial pleasure. Engross yourself in the solid state of huduri, Allahu hadiri, Allahu nadiri, Allahu ma'i, which you have developed with Allahu Ta'ala. The desire for ghalaba hal, that is a temporary state of a spiritual experience, is called hal, a temporary state of spiritual experience in which the salik derives much ecstatic pleasure. This desire for ghalaba hal and its pleasure is in reality a desire for ghairullah, for things besides Allah. You should become absorbed in divine perception, which will induce in you independence from all things besides Allah Ta'ala. Hasbi. Never permit other things to divert you from Allah Ta'ala, inducing in you an attitude of dependence, of independence from Him. There's no benefit for you in the ghalaba, the domination of the warid. You have already achieved its purpose. So concern yourself with your true occupation, namely your relationship with Allah Ta'ala. Hasbi Rabbi Jallallah, ma fi qalbi gayrullah, Nuru Muhammad Sallallah, La ilaha illallah. The incidents of waridat will annihilate the foundation of all habits. Because, you know why? Because when a king passes through a place, all else becomes overshadowed. Since warid emanates from the divine court of splendor and greatness, it destroys all natural habits and attributes which come in its path. It imposes truth over falsehood, utterly eliminating it. Meaning, this means, at this juncture, the Shaykh Rahmatullah Alayhi explains the signs of waridat to distinguish these waridat from imagination and personal thought. One is just imagination, you know, but distinguish it. When waridat settle in the heart, they completely annihilate and eradicate the evil and the bestial attributes of the nafs and create in the salik the lofty, angelic qualities of virtue and high states. Waridat are among the armies of Allah, the junood of Allah Ta'ala. When the royal army descends on a place, it destroys the enemy and overruns the place. Similarly, when waridat, which are like the armies of Allah, descend on the nafs, they overwhelm the nafs and they establish their domination. The true warid coming from Allah Ta'ala, the Qahar, the wrathful one, the subduer, is accompanied by the attributes of Qahar, subjugation, wrath, galaba, domination. Thus, human qualities and evil attributes in the path of the warid are utterly destroyed and uprooted. Allah Ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, we fling the haqq against the batil. We fling the haqq against the batil. Then suddenly batil is destroyed. So this was all about waridat. The 22nd chapter. There are 30 chapters in this book. This is the 22nd chapter. On the different states of the salikin regarding the beginning and the end of the spiritual sojourn and journey. Every salik will have a different state. The Shaykh Ali Rahmah says, Allah Ta'ala has appointed a group among his servants for his obedience. He chose another group for his love. One group for his ta'at, one group for his love. Allah Ta'ala aids both groups with his bounties, and the forgiveness of Allah cannot be prevented. Commentary. The topic has already been discussed earlier. The servants of Allah consist of two classes, the Ubbad or the Zuhad. Ubbad, the worshippers, or the Zuhad. Both these refer to one class, Ubbad and the Zuhad, the Abids and the Zahids, one class. They are also called the Abrar. وَتَوَفَّنَا مَعَ الْأَبْرَارِ Abrar. They are also called Abrar. The second class is called the Muqarrabin. As-Sabiqun, As-Sabiqun, Ulaika al-Muqarrabun, Fi Jannatin Naim. These two groups are mentioned here. One group has been appointed by Allah Ta'ala for his ibadat. The Ubbad or the Zuhad or the Abrar, they engage in the outward acts of ibadat, Zahiri acts of ibadat, as Nafil Salat, Wazifa, Sijda, Sadaqah, Hajj, Khidmat to mankind. They are occupied night and day in these acts of worship. Their purpose for executing acts of ibadat is admission to Jannah and salvation from Jahannam. The second group has been selected by Allah Ta'ala for His love and proximity. While the external acts of ibadah are less than the ibadah of the first group. Yeah. The muqarrabun, their acts of ibadah are less. While the external acts of ibadah are less than the ibadah of the first group, their actual deeds are with their hearts. At all times, they are concerned with Allah Ta'ala. His remembrance permeates their hearts. There is nothing else besides Allah Ta'ala in their hearts. They are not concerned with Jannah and Jahannam. Hasbi Rabbi Jallallah. Ma fi qalbi gairullah. Nuru Muhammad Sallallah. La ilaha illallah. Regarding these two groups, Allah Ta'ala says, most certainly we shall aid this group and that group with the bounties of your Rabb. And the bounties of your Rabb cannot be prevented. Before this ayah, let's go back, Allah Ta'ala mentions two groups before this ayah. The group whose endeavor is for the akhirah will attain its goal. The other group strives only for worldly achievement. They will acquire only as much as Allah Ta'ala decrees. Their ultimate destination will be Jahannam, ma'adallah. After mentioning these two groups, Allah Ta'ala states that He aids both groups. The group which strives for the akhirah is aided with amali salihah, and obstacles are cleared from their path. The aid for the worldly people, there's an aid for them too. The aid for the worldly people consists of the ni'mat, the comforts and luxuries of the world, engrossing themselves in worldly pleasures. They forget their Creator and they lapse into transgression. So after that now, it is then mentioned that the bounties of Allah are not restricted. Whoever desires should take of His bounties. Similar are the other two groups, the Abrar and the Muqarrabun. He aids the Abidin, the Zahidin, according to their quest. They will occupy themselves in ibadat night and day until they finally acquire their goal. Divine aid for the Muqarrabin corresponds to their elevated ranks. Since their goal of the Muqarrabun is only the Dhat of Allah. It is only Allah, Allah Himself, the essence of Allah, the Dhat of Allah. That's their goal. Every vestige of Gairullah has been expunged from their hearts. Hasbi Rabbi Jallallah. Ma fi qalbi Gairullah. Therefore, both these groups are the special servants of Allah Ta'ala. And this is classifying Ibadillahi Salihin. The Shaykh then says, alayhi rahmah, it is not necessary that a person whose exclusive rank is substantiated by way of karama. It is not necessary that a person whose exclusive rank is substantiated by way of karama, miracles, is completely free of the calamities of the nafs. Sometimes karama, miracles, is awarded to even a person whose steadfastness, istiqamat, in obedience of the Sharia has not yet reached the stage of perfection. That's not the criterion. Karamat. The masses, and normally the commoners, the masses, they are awed, overwhelmed by the display of miracles. They have much faith in those who demonstrate karamat and miracles and supernatural acts. In fact, they consider karamat to be the criterion of wilayat. Ye bahut bada wali hai. The true and actual miracle is firmness on the Sharia. That's the true miracle. Firmness on the Sharia and purification from evil qualities. That's why we have the statement, al-istiqamatu fawqa al-karama. Istiqamat, steadfastness, is above, way beyond that of a miracle. Here the Shaykh Rahmatullah alayhi dispels this error. It does not follow from the demonstration of miraculous acts that the person has attained complete freedom from the evil attributes of the nafs, because sometimes even the imperfect man is awarded the ability to display karamat. In fact, similar acts known as istidraj are displayed by even non-Muslims. What the prophets do are called mu'jizat. What happens through the hands of the awliya are called karamat. And what the kafirs do, they also do supernatural acts that is called istidraj. They are displayed even by non-Muslims. Thus, the display of miraculous acts is not the criterion for wilayat. The criterion is strict adherence to the Sharia. The Sharia must become like second nature, second nature, second nature. And purification of the nafs. That's the criterion. The Sheikh then says, and this is so deep here, subhanAllah, there are two kinds of concealment. And you know Allah is Sattar, He covers and conceals. There are two kinds of concealment. That is concealing faults. Two kinds of concealment. One is concealing one from the incidence of sins. Concealing one from the incidence and the occurrence of sins. And number two, concealment after the commission of sin. Two types. One is concealing a person from the incidence of sin, and one is concealment after the sin. The ordinary people are desirous for concealment of their sins. They don't want nobody to know. That's the concealment they want. Concealment of their sins, so that their rank does not fall in the estimate of others. Because if they get to know what I'm doing, boy, my rank, I will fall in their eyes. So that their rank does not fall in the estimate of others. That's why they desire this concealment. But the kawas, the elite, or the awliya, they seek concealment so that they do not even fall in the estimate of their true King Allah Ta'ala. That's why they seek concealment. They don't want to fall in Allah's sight. The second concealment, my sins must be concealed because I don't want to fall in the eyes of people. The servants of Allah Ta'ala seeking concealment for sins are of two types. This is the commentary here now. The one kind seeks divine concealment from the incidents of sin. In spite of the natural propensity of the nafs to sin and transgress, Allah Ta'ala saves them from the commission of sin. Despite the nafs propensity and speeding towards what? Sin. Allah saves them from the commission of sin. The second type seeks concealment after they have committed the sins. They are motivated to supplicate for forgiveness. Oh Allah, forgive me. Oh Allah, cover my faults. Forgive me. They are motivated to supplicate for forgiveness and concealment of their misdeeds. You know why? To avoid being publicly disgraced. To avoid being publicly disgraced. And nothing wrong with that, you know. I mean, you don't want to be disgraced in this world. وَأَجِرْنَا مِنْ خِزْيِ الدُّنْيَا وَعَذَابِ الْآخِرَةِ. Allah save us from the disgrace of this world and the azab of the akhirah. But their main purpose is to look good in public eyes and to be saved from a disgrace in public eyes. This motive is underlined, this motive of theirs is underlined by their deficiency in Iman. They're lacking in Iman and their ignorance of the reality and hakikat of Iman. Also, the perception of people is dominant in them. They are still seeing people. The perception of people that is ghalib and dominant in them. And they have the hope of gaining some benefit from people. They still have that hope of gaining benefit from people. But when a man detaches himself from Ghairullah, then everything is dependencies only on Allah. They also fear people. They fear people. Hence, they supplicate to Allah Ta'ala to conceal their misdeeds. While the concern of ordinary people is the estimate of others, that's their concern, the elite or the kawas are concerned with Allah Ta'ala. They're worried about Allah Ta'ala. They desire their nafs, that their nafs should be concealed and saved and blocked from sin. They want that type of concealment. It's a protection from sin. That's the concealment they want. A concealment from the incidents of sin. They desire their nafs to be concealed, veiled, saved, protected from sin solely for the sake of Allah. They fear being distanced from His mercy, while others fear that they will be distanced from the gaze of others and from being held in high esteem by others. They fear being distanced from His rahmat. Their gaze is not on others. They do not concern themselves with the criticism and praise of people. They have nothing to do with criticism and praise of people, like Maulana Sheikh, our Sheikh, Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi, when he wrote to his Sheikh Haji Imdadullah, that one of his states and condition is that if people praise me or they blame me, it doesn't really cause any effect on me, whether I get praise or whether I get blame. They neither have hope in people, nor do they fear them. They have no reliance on people, nor do they derive any peace or comfort from them. Their aim is Rizaya Ilahi. That's their aim, pleasure of their Mawla. Hence they abstain from sin. The Sheikh then says, he now brings to tell us what's the difference between what is maqam and what is hal. In the terms of tasawwus, we have maqam, a station, plural is maqamat, and we have hal and ahwal. Briefly, hal and ahwal are temporary spiritual states. Maqamat are stations. The Shaykh goes into that. Because as I say, this is all about progress, 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 progress. Every time you get 1 foot, every time you get some control over your nafs, some control, that's progress. Some control, progress. But it's not, but sometimes the nafs has overpower you too. It will happen too, but no need to become depressed. Because then the nafs is going to feel happy and say, well, I win now. Drop down there and stay there. And then shaitan begins to laugh now and say, stay down. Sometimes, one of the stations, which are called, in this terminology, they are called maqamat stations. Sometimes one of the maqamat, stations of yaqeen. So a person is given a bayan on yaqeen, big bayan on yaqeen, is explained. Sometimes one of the stations of yaqeen, one of the maqamat of yaqeen is explained by a person who has become aware thereof. He is aware of yaqeen. He knows about it, so he's given a bayan about it. And sometimes it has been explained by a person who has already reached that station. Farqi nahi is a difference. And then one by who has already reached that station. The difference between the two is discerned by only the Ahle Basirat. Only the people of the heart with vision of the heart can know the difference. That is the Awliya Kamilin. Others will be in doubt and uncertainty in this matter. Let's break this down, simplify it. Maqamat, maqamat yaqeen, stations of yaqeen, and notice the plural. It means it have different stations of yaqeen and certainty. Refers to the branches of iman, like zuhud is one of the maqamat. Zuhud, abstinence. Wara, piety. Tawakkul, another maqam. Qana'at, contentment. These are stations of yaqeen, maqamat yaqeen. When any of these attributes settles in the salik, he has some type of zuhud, abstinence. He has some type of wara, some tawakkul, some qanaat. When any of these attributes settles in the salik, its influences waxes and wanes. The influences waxes and wanes. In other words, rising and falling, rising and falling, rising and falling. For example, the influence of zuhud, abstinence, predominates the heart. That predominates the heart. While at other times, this influence wanes and drops and decreases. It comes and goes, comes and goes, comes and goes. The state is not constant. It's not constant. This condition of inconsistency of the attributes is termed as hal. That is termed as hal. So it's a temporary state. It's a condition of inconsistency. Yes, there's a bit of tawakkul. There's a bit of wara. There's a bit of qanaat and contentment. There's a bit of zuhud. But it comes and goes, rises and falls. This condition of inconsistency of the attributes is termed hal. When the attribute like tawakkul, wara, zuhud, qanaat, etc., when the attribute becomes entrenched, it becomes inseparable from the heart. And when it has become a permanent and an integral attribute of the heart, the condition is now called maqam. You have now reached a maqam, a station, when it becomes entrenched, permanent, and integral attribute of the heart. The condition now, that hal is now changed and called maqam. Example, when zuhud, abstinence, becomes a permanent state, it will be called maqam is zuhud, station of zuhud. Sometimes a man who has not reached the station or the maqam, he discusses and explains this concept, and he's talking about zuhud. Like normally we give bayan about what? Abstinence, staying away from the dunya. But he has not reached that maqam, but yet he is talking about it. He is still in the state known as hal, but he has some awareness of it. He has some marifat of it, because he is in what? Hal, because it comes and it goes, comes and goes. He is still in the state known as hal, which is in proximity to maqam, because after hal is what? Maqam. For example, he gives a discourse, a khutbah, a bayan, a lecture on tawakkul, although he himself has not reached excellence in it. Sometimes the discourse is given by a man who has achieved the maqam of the attribute. There's a great difference in the exposition and style of both, but everyone cannot distinguish the difference. Allah Ta'ala has imbued the people of Basirat, which is eyes of the heart, spiritual insight, with true discernment. They can know the difference. By virtue of their special insight and Basirat, they are able to distinguish between the degrees of sidq, truth, of an exceptionally lofty degree of the speakers. The one who is deficient, that is the man who has not attained maqam, here what happens? He is pleased with the exposition he gives. He feels pleased with his bayan. He feels pleased with his discourse, his khutbah. He feels highly pleased with his research. I did a lot of research on that, mashallah. You gave a nice talk on tawakkul today. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. I did quite some research on it. And he feels pleased with it. There's some force and emphasis in his discourse. Force and emphasis. And sometimes I speaks with josh, loudness, and josh, and loudness. You ever see how the Mashayikh speak? Cool, calm. How Hazrat does talk? How Mufti Ahmad Kanpuri does talk? Sometimes there is some force and emphasis in his discourse. because he has not reached that station. But he speaks as one observing from a distance. These realities therefore appear to him wonderful and marvelous because he observes from a distance. He considers only the knowledge of the attributes to be great. The knowledge of the attributes to be great. Wow. On the other hand, the discourse of the one who has attained the station, the maqam, will be a normal talk. It's a normal talk or a normal discussion, devoid of the frills, devoid of all the frills and the trappings of rehearsed speeches. Not so? This could be better understood by analogy, by qiyas. When a person sees a city for the first time, the sight and the attractions appear to be wonderful, whereas these things are normal for the local residents. But he's seen it for the first time and from a distance, wow, kya sheher hai. But for the normal residents, so the efficacy of the discourses of these two persons will differ. There'll be a difference in the bayan of both of them. The speech of the one deficient in his spiritual rank, you know that with all that josh and trimmings and all them thing, it will initially attract the people. It will attract the people initially, making an impression on them. Kya, what a talk. Nice talk, man. Wow. However, the effect of his speech will soon dissipate. It will make an impression, but it will soon dissipate. On the other hand, the speech, as well as the suhbat and the company of the Kamil Sheikh may initially it may not be big and impressive like that. It may not initially be impressive. People may not understand his talks even fully in the beginning. But despite this, the effect of his talk will be enduring, and not dissipate like that one Joshi talk. Sometimes a man who has no qualification, then you have the other man now, a man who has no qualification either in hal or maqam. He don't have no hal, no maqam. He also gives discourses, but he gives discourses now on the topic of maqamat. But he doesn't have hal, he doesn't have maqam. How he does that? He studies books and delivers speeches to ensure a following. He endeavors to gain the confidence of people. He simply advertises piety. Ma'adallah. The sign of such a person, uski alamat kya hai, is his inability to explain matters of tasawwuf. When questioned, he can't explain matters of tasawwuf. He is able to speak only on the subject which he has swatted off from kitabs and books. On the contrary, the Kamil Sheikh, the one who has reached the maqamat or even some level of hal, will tender convincing answers and know how to deal with issues and answer questions. Until next week, inshallah. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruk wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wassalamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Social expectation drowns us all inside. What you have should be what I want, 'cause what I have just ain't alright. The clothes I wear, the way I comb my hair, how I live, oh I don't care. This is who I am, this is me.